She slid the blue dish across the table and said it the way you'd offer someone a kindness. This is your share. Mari, Mom, would have wanted you to have it. 40 months I had slept in our mother's house, counting her pills at 2 in the morning, learning the sound of her breathing, the way other people learn a song, and a casserole dish was what they handed me at the repast. Still warm, still smelling of the green beans a neighbor had made. Here is what my sister did not know. That afternoon, 9 days before our mother died, somebody had signed our mother's name to a deed that gave that entire house to one daughter, and our mother spent that week on a ventilator in the intensive care unit, unable to lift her own hand, unable to hold a pen, unable to spell her own name. I walked out of the repast with 3 things: the dish, a spiral notebook I had filled in my own handwriting, and a brass house key on a cracked leather fob that no longer turned in the lock, because the locks had been changed while I was at the cemetery. Today, I read deeds for a living. I am a certified title examiner. My job is to trace who really owns a thing, one signature at a time, going back through every transfer until the chain either holds or breaks. Last spring, I finally read the signatures they forged in our mother's name, and I put that house back exactly where it belonged. Down to the legal description, down to the metes and bounds. My name is Marisol Reyes. People call me Mari. And if you have ever been the one who stayed, the family member who was counted on for everything and counted as nothing, the one who did the caring and got handed a casserole dish where an inheritance should have been, then I need you to stay with me, because the most honest thing I ever owned was that notebook full of my own bad handwriting, and it turned out to be the one thing in the whole story that nobody could fake. Let me take you back. Our father, Hector, died in 2003 when I was 19, and my sister Diana was 26. He went the way careful men sometimes do. Suddenly, with a heart that simply stopped on a Tuesday in the driveway, with the truck still running. He left almost nothing, except the house at 812 Persimmon Street, which was paid off, and a small life insurance policy worth $40,000 that he had bought when we were children and never told anyone about. That policy mattered later. Hold on to it. After Dad died, Diana became, in her own telling, the grown-up. She said it constantly. Somebody had to be the grown-up. She handled the funeral paperwork. She handled the bank. She sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of envelopes and told our mother not to worry, that she would take care of all of it. And our mother, who had buried a husband and did not want to bury a single piece of paper, let her. I want to be fair to Diana, because the villain in a true story is never a cartoon. She was not a screamer. She did not shout or storm out of rooms. She was calm and capable and always concerned. Her cruelty never arrived as cruelty. It arrived as help. It arrived as a clipboard and a pen and a soft voice saying, I already took care of it. You don't need to look. That is the thing about being managed by someone like Diana. By the time you realize the help was a fence, you are already inside it. For a few years, nothing happened that you could point to. I trained as a dental hygienist. I rented a small apartment across town. I cleaned teeth. I paid my bills. I had a life that was mine, and quiet and ordinary. And then, in the fall of 2010, our mother started forgetting things. Small things first. The names of streets she had driven for 30 years. whether she had eaten lunch. The stove, left on, twice in 1 week, until the smoke alarm in the hallway became a sound. The neighbors knew. The doctor used the word dementia, and then the word progressive, and then a sentence I will not forget, which was that she should not be living alone. There was a family meeting about it. There is always a family meeting. Diana ran it, the way she ran everything, with a legal pad and a pen she clicked when she wanted the room to listen. She had a job at a title and escrow company downtown. A good job, salaried, with health insurance and a desk, and a chair that reclined. I had a job. I could leave. So the math, as Diana laid it out on the legal pad, was simple. Diana would handle the money and the documents, because that was her world. I would move into Persimmon Street and handle our mother. Because, as she put it, I was always the soft one. I did not hear the trap in that sentence. You probably do. Because you are not in the room, and you are not tired, and you are not 19 years into loving a woman who is starting to look at you like a stranger. But I did not hear it. I heard, we each do what we are good at. I quit my job. I gave up my apartment. I moved into the back bedroom of the house I grew up in, and I became, for the next 40 months, my mother's hands and memory and clock. That was the first beat, and here is the mini hook I want you to carry. The day I moved in, Diana put herself on every one of our mother's bank accounts. For convenience, she said. So the bills get paid. She did not put me on a single one, and I, the soft one, said thank you. Now let me tell you what those 40 months were actually made of, because this is where most people in my position go wrong, even in their own heads. They remember the love and forget the labor. I am going to make you see the labor, because the labor is the case. I kept a notebook. I have kept one my whole life, a habit from hygienist school, where you write down every patient, every procedure, every note. Because if it is not written down, it did not happen. So I bought a 99-cent spiral notebook at the drugstore on Cesar Chavez Boulevard. And on the first page, I wrote the date and our mother's blood pressure, and the 2 pills she took at 8 in the morning, and I never stopped. 1 notebook became 4. 4 became 11. 11 notebooks, every day dated, every entry in my own slanted left-handed scrawl. Every page signed with my initials at the bottom, because that is how I was trained. I wrote down the medications. I wrote down the doctor visits, the name of the doctor, the time of the appointment, what was decided. I wrote down what I spent, because Diana controlled the accounts, and I did not. So when I bought the adult briefs, the liquid nutrition, the special spoons, the gas to drive to the specialist 2 counties over, I paid out of my own thinning savings, and I wrote down every dollar, expecting, the way you expect the sun, to be paid back. I averaged $340 a month of my own money on our mother's care. Over 40 months, that is $13,600. I never asked for it out loud. I just wrote it down because the writing was a kind of faith. Somebody, someday, would want to know the truth, and the truth would be on the page. There was one person, in those years, who saw me. I want you to meet her, because she said a thing I have carried ever since. Her name was Delia, and she was the hospice nurse who started coming 3 days a week in the last year, when our mother stopped knowing my face. Delia was 60-some years old, with reading glasses on a beaded chain, and hands that had closed a great many eyes. She would find me at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, writing in the notebook by the light over the stove. And one night she put her warm hand flat on the open page, and she said, "Keep writing, Mija. Paper remembers what people work hard to forget. I did not understand then how completely she was right. I thought she was being kind to a tired woman. Remember that line. Paper remembers what people work hard to forget. It is going to come back. And when it comes back, it is going to take a house with it. Here is the second beat and the mini hook inside it. Somewhere in that third year, I asked Diana, just once, to put me on one of the accounts. Because I was tired of fronting money and waiting. We were standing in the kitchen. She did not get angry. She smiled, the concerned smile, and she said the sentence that became the whole title of my life. She said, "Oh, Mari, you were never good with the paperwork." And she patted my arm, and she went back to her spreadsheet, and I stood there feeling, for the first time, that something cold had walked through the room. You were never good with the paperwork. Write that one down, too. I am going to hand it back to her at the end, and it is going to weigh 100 pounds. There was a third beat, and it is the one that taught me what I was actually dealing with. In the winter of that same year, the specialist 2 counties over wanted to try a new medication for our mother, and the first month of it was not covered. And it cost $600. I did not have $600 that month because I had not earned a wage in over 2 years. Because I was the one who stayed. So I called Diana, who sat on every account our mother owned, and I asked her to release $600 of our mother's own money to buy our mother's own medicine. And my sister, in the kind, level voice she used for closing things, told me she did not think it was a good use of Mom's funds, and that we had to be careful with the estate, and that maybe I could find a way to cover it. With what? I did not ask. I drove home, and I sold my father's watch, the one good thing of his I had, to a pawn shop on the access road for $220, and I put the rest on a credit card, and I bought the medicine. And I wrote it down in the notebook, the date, the amount, the name of the drug, because that is what I do. I want you to sit with the shape of that. Because it tells you everything. The estate she said we had to protect was a house and a life insurance policy that she had already, in her own mind, decided were hers. She was not being frugal. She was guarding a thing she had already stolen. From the one person who might still need a piece of it. I did not understand that yet. But I wrote it down, and the mini hook I will leave you here is this. The night I sold my father's watch, Diana mailed a change of address form to the county tax office, so that every tax statement and every notice about 812 Persimmon Street would go to her post office box, and not to the house where I was living. I would not learn that. For 8 years, she was already making sure I would never see a single piece of paper about the place I was sleeping in. The last week came in March of 2014. Our mother had a stroke on top of everything else, and they took her by ambulance to Mercy Regional. And she went onto a ventilator in the intensive care unit on the 27th, and she never came off it. I want to be precise about that week, because precision is the whole game. From the 27th of March until she died on the 9th of April, our mother could not speak, could not sit up, could not hold a cup, could not hold a pen, could not write her own name. I know this with the certainty of a person who was there, in the vinyl chair beside the bed, from 7 in the morning until late at night, writing it all down. Her oxygen, numbers, the names of the nurses, the times the doctor came, who visited, and who did not. And here is the detail that the rest of the story turns on. So let me set it down slowly. On the morning of March 31st, I was in that vinyl chair beside my mother's bed by 7, because Delia was off that day, and I would not leave a ventilated woman alone with a shift she did not know. I signed the hospital visitor log at the front desk. The way you do. I wrote in my notebook. All day. My mother did not leave that bed. She could not have left that bed. She was, on March 31st, 2014, 2 counties away from the title and escrow office, where Diana worked, attached to a machine that was breathing for her. That is the day. Hold that day in your hand. Like a stone. The days after the 31st ran together the way those days do. But I kept writing. Because writing was the only useful thing left to do with my hands. The doctor came at 7 each morning. And again near 6 in the evening. The machine breathed for her at a rate someone reset. Twice a day, Delia worked the nights that week even though she was not assigned to. Because, she said, nobody should keep a vigil alone, and she would sit on the far side of the bed with her reading glasses down her nose. And once, around 3 in the morning, she watched me fill another page, and she said it again, softer than before, like she was making sure I would still have it later. Keep writing, Mija, and I did. I wrote that on the 7th of April our mother's hand twitched against the blanket, and I held it, and that on the 8th she was very still. I did not know. I was writing evidence. I thought. I was writing a goodbye. It was both. That is the thing. Nobody tells you about a record. It does not know yet what it is going to be needed for. It just has to be true on the day it is written. And then it waits. She died on April 9th, at 4:19 in the morning, with my hand on her chest and Delia on the other side of the bed. And I did not cry, because crying felt like leaving, and I was not ready to leave. We had the funeral on the 12th, and it was at the repast after the funeral, in the church hall with the folding tables and the green beans, that Diana slid the blue dish across the table and told me it was my share. I asked her, quietly, because I did not want a scene at our mother's repast, what she meant by my share. And Diana said, with the patient warmth of a woman explaining a closed matter, that the house was handled, that there was nothing to divide, that Mom's affairs were all in order, and that I should not worry about the paperwork. And she said it again, softer, like a lullaby. You were never good with the paperwork, Mari. I went home that night to the apartment I no longer had, which is to say I went to a motel off the interstate, because I had given up my apartment 40 months earlier to move into Persimmon Street. And Persimmon Street I discovered when I drove past it. Had a new lock on the front door and my brass key turned in it and caught and went nowhere. So this is the part where I tell you what I felt. Except I am not going to. Because feeling is not the case. And self-pity is not a story. I will tell you what I did instead. I sat in a motel parking lot off the interstate at 1 in the morning, with a casserole dish on the passenger seat and a notebook on my lap, and a key that opened nothing. And I let myself cry exactly once. One time. Alone, in a car, with the engine off and the windows fogging. And then I wiped my face and I opened the notebook to a clean page, and I wrote the date, and underneath it, I wrote 4 words. Find out the truth. That was the only crying I did in this entire story. I want you to know that, because everything that comes next, I did dry-eyed. If you have ever been the one who stayed, who gave up the job and the apartment and the years, and got handed a warm dish where your inheritance should have been, do something for me right now. Type the word stayed in the comments. Just that. One word. I read them. I read all of them because I know exactly how quiet that particular kind of room can be. And I want you to know somebody is reading. Now, the rebuild. I am going to move fast through these years because you already know I survived. And the survival is not the interesting part. The interesting part is what I survived into. I had $1,700 to my name and no job and a 40-month gap on a resume. So I took the first work I could get, which was the overnight desk at a different motel. And I cleaned teeth part-time at a clinic that paid in cash and asked no questions. And on my one day off, I slept. For most of a year, I lived in a single room with a hot plate and a window that faced a wall. I paid off nothing fast. I just stopped sinking. And then a small thing happened that changed everything. The way the real turns in a life are always small. The title and escrow company where Diana worked was a big regional chain. But it was not the only one in the county. A competitor, a quiet old firm 2 towns over, needed a front desk person who could show up on time and not steal. I could do both. So at 31 years old, I started answering phones at a title company, and somewhere in my second month, bored at the desk, I picked up a stack of documents waiting to be filed. And I started reading them. I could not stop reading them. Deeds, liens, easements, releases. A chain of title is a story. It turns out, it is the story of every hand a piece of land has passed through, written in the driest language human beings have ever invented. And if you learn to read it, you can see the lies. You can see where a signature does not match. You can see where a release was never recorded. You can see where somebody got away with something 20 years ago and is still getting away with it because nobody ever read the chain. All the way back, I had spent 40 months keeping a record. Nobody asked for. It turns out, there is a profession for people like that. I took the night classes. I got the certification. I learned the statutes, the recording acts, the rules of notarization, the exact requirements that make a signature legally real or legally worthless. By 2020, I was a certified title examiner, and I was good. And I was good precisely at the thing my sister told me, in a kitchen, that I would never be good at. Here is how you know. A montage is really about transformation, and not errands. The woman who walked out of that repast counted other people's debts in a notebook, and felt small for it. The woman I became got paid to do exactly that. All day, for banks and buyers and old families with tangled land. And the smallness turned out to be a skill the whole county needed. I moved out of the room with the hot plate into a 1-bedroom with actual light. I rebuilt my credit, 1 boring month at a time. I bought a used car that started every morning. I did not become rich, and I did not become hard. I became precise, and precision, it turns out, is a kind of armor that no one can see you putting on. I want you to hear that. If you are in the room with the hot plate, right now, the thing they shamed you for is very often the exact thing that is going to save you. You just have not been paid for it yet. I did not go looking for Persimmon Street. I want that on the record. For years, I did not even let myself think about it, because the wound had a scab, and I had a life, and I did not want to be a woman organized around a grievance. But here is the thing about learning to read deeds. You cannot unlearn it. And one ordinary Tuesday in March of 2022, 8 years almost to the day, I was teaching a new hire how to pull a chain of title from the county recorder's public index. And I used, as a throwaway example, the only address I knew by heart, 812 Persimmon Street. Stay with me. This is the part I built the whole rest of my life to be ready for. If you only stay for 1 more minute, stay for this one. Subscribe, so the algorithm keeps me on your screen long enough to show you what came up on that index. Because what came up is the reason I learned to read deeds at all. I just did not know it yet. The index loaded, and there In the chain of title for my mother's house was a warranty deed I had never heard of. Grantor, Estela Reyes. Grantee, Diana Reyes. Dated the 31st of March, 2014. Recorded the 2nd of April, 2014. I stood at that new hire's shoulder, and the room went very far away, because I knew that date the way you know, your own birthday. The 31st of March, 2014, was the day I sat in a vinyl chair from 7 in the morning until late at night beside my mother, who was on a ventilator in an intensive care unit, 2 counties away, unable to hold a pen. My mother did not sign that deed. My mother could not have signed that deed. Somebody signed it for her. I sent the new hire to lunch. I did not pull the document at work, because the moment I understood what I was looking at, I understood something else, which is that this was mine and not my employer's, and that if I touched it through the company's accounts, I would taint it, and I would deserve to. So that afternoon I went to my supervisor and I told him, plainly, that an address connected to my own family had appeared in a routine training pool, that I had a personal conflict, and that I was recusing myself from anything that ever touched it. He wrote a note for the file. I wanted that note to exist. The whole difference between Diana and me, in the end, is the note for the file. Then I drove, on my own time, as a private member of the public, the way anyone can, to the county recorder's office. And I ordered certified copies of every instrument in the chain. And I drove to the county clerk, and I ordered the entire probate file for the estate of Estela Reyes. And that night, I sat at my own kitchen table, alone, and I read them 1 page at a time. The first page was the deed, warranty deed Estela Reyes to Diana Reyes. The house and lot at 812 Persimmon Street. The full legal description. The metes and bounds I could have recited in my sleep. At the bottom, a signature that was supposed to be my mother's. I had 40 months of my mother's signature in my notebooks, on consent forms, on the back of photographs. This was not it. It was close. Somebody had practiced, too, but the hand that wrote it pressed too hard and looped the wrong way on the capital. And I read signatures for a living now. And this one was a forgery. And I knew it the way you know, a stranger wearing your mother's coat. I turned the page. And here is where the cold came up through the floor. Under the signature was the notary block. The deed had been notarized, sworn before an officer of the state, by a notary named R. Castellano. A notarization is the whole thing that makes a deed safe to record. It is the state saying, an officer watched this person sign. This is real, and there was the notary's commission number printed right there on the page. So the next morning I did the most boring thing in this entire story. And the most lethal. I went to the Secretary of State's public website, the one that anybody can use, and I typed in the notary's commission number, and the state of Texas told me that R. Castellano's commission as a notary public had expired on the 28th of February, 2014. The deed was notarized on the 31st of March. That is 31 days after Castellano stopped being a notary at all. On the day that deed was supposedly sworn, Arn Castellano had no more legal authority to notarize a document than the casserole dish on my counter. The notarization was not a small mistake. It was a dead signature, certifying a dead woman's signature. The whole instrument was built on air. I turned the page again. And this is the one that I will not pretend did not reach me, because the law is impersonal, but this was not. In the probate file, filed by the executor of the estate, who was Diana, there was a document called a receipt and release. It is the form and air signs to say, I have received my share of this estate, and I release the estate from any further claim. And there, at the bottom of that receipt and release, was my name, Marisol Reyes, in a signature that was supposed to be mine. I have signed my own name my whole life. I have a left-handed slant, and I never closed the loop on the R scene. This signature closed the loop on the R. Somebody had sat at a desk and forged my name onto a document that said I had received $20,000, my half of our father's $40,000 life insurance policy, and that I was satisfied, and that I released the estate. I never received $20,000. I never received 20 cents. There is no canceled check, no wire, no deposit, because the money never moved to me. It moved to the woman who signed my name. There was one more page, and it was the smallest one, and it told me she had planned all of it. Clipped into the county tax records was a change of address form. Dated the winter our mother was still alive. The same winter I sold my father's watch to buy medicine. It rerouted every tax statement and every legal notice for 812 Persimmon Street to a post office box in Diana's name. That is why no notice of the deed transfer ever reached the house. That is why I lived 4 more months in a home whose ownership had already been forged out from under me, and never saw a single piece of mail that would have told me she had not panicked at the end and grabbed a house. She had built a tunnel, quietly, while I was counting pills, and she had sealed every place the light might get in. The forgery was not a moment. It was a project, and projects, unlike moments, leave a paper trail at every step. I sat at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning, the same hour Delia used to find me. And I did not cry, because I had spent my one cry in a parking lot 8 years before. I just opened a fresh notebook to a clean page, and I wrote the date, the way I always do. And underneath it, I wrote down everything I had: the deed, the forged grantor signature, the expired commission, the receipt and release, the forged heir signature, the $20,000 that never came. And then I did the calculation, out loud, in an empty kitchen. The way you check a thing you are afraid to hope. My mother's house, on the day Diana forged that deed, was worth $184,000, and my half would have been $92,000. By the spring, I found the deed. The house was worth $310,000. Half of $310,000 is $155,000. Add the $20,000 from the life insurance that was forged out from under me. Add the $13,600 of my own money I had fronted for our mother's care. $340 a month for 40 months. I was not going to leave a single dollar of it unspoken. But understand me, this was never about the money, and I am going to prove that to you before the end. It was about the page. It was about the fact that somebody looked at 40 months of my life and decided the cleanest way to erase it was a forged signature, because she believed, to her bones, that I was never good with the paperwork. Reader, paperwork is the only thing I am good at now. Here is where I have to be careful, and where most people in these stories go wrong and lose you because they reach for the dramatic shortcut. They imagine bursting into a room, or broadcasting a secret, or some lucky accident that does the work for them. I want to tell you plainly that none of that happened, because none of that was necessary. And because the moment you break a rule to win, you hand the wrongdoer the only defense they have left. So I did it the slow, clean, legal way. And the slow, clean, legal way is the catharsis. Watch. First, I hired a lawyer a quiet woman named Priya Anand, who did quiet title work and did not waste words. I gave her the certified copies. I did not give her my feelings. I gave her the deed, the commission record, the receipt and release, the probate file, and 11 spiral notebooks. She read the notebooks for a long time. Then she looked up at me over the top of them, and she said the second sentence I will keep forever. She said, "You wrote your whole alibi without knowing you'd need one." Paper remembers what people work hard to forget. Second, we retained a forensic document examiner, a board-certified one, who compared the forged signatures to dozens of genuine samples. My mother's from her own medical consents. Mine from a decade of my own documents. The examiner's written report came back exactly as I knew it would. Both signatures, in her professional opinion, to a reasonable degree of certainty, were not written by the people whose names they bore. That report was page 1 of a wall I was building, brick by lawful brick, and there was no door in it. Third, we filed, not a scene, a lawsuit. A suit to quiet title and to set aside the deed and the receipt and release on the grounds of forgery. And a petition to reopen the estate of Estella Reyes. We did not have to manufacture a single thing, because the wrongdoer had manufactured everything for us and left it recorded in the public record, with her own name in the grantee box and her own hand. The examiner would later testify. In the signatures, the exposure did not come from a trick. It came from her own documented acts, read by someone who finally knew how to read them. Fourth, separately, I reported the notary, R. I. Tind. Castellano had notarized a deed 31 days after losing the commission. And that is its own violation, with its own consequences. And a notary in Texas carries a surety bond, exactly so that the people they harm can be made whole. I filed the complaint with the Secretary of State. I filed the claim against the bond. I did every one of these things on a form, in an office, with a number, the way the system is built to be used by anyone willing to read the instructions. Diana had used the system as a weapon, because she thought she was the only one who could read it. I used the system the way it is actually meant to be used, which turns out to be the deadlier thing. Now, I am going to give you the reckoning, and I am going to give it to you the way it actually went, which is to say, without a single raised voice, because the silence is the point. When the suit was served, Diana called me. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She left a long message, warm at first, then less warm, then a third one that was not warm at all. All of them built around the same idea, which was that I was tearing the family apart after everything she had sacrificed. I saved all three. I did not answer one. There was one conversation, face to face, because I chose to have it, not to argue, to inform. I drove to the title company 2 towns over where she still worked, and I waited until her lunch. And I met her in the little courtyard outside. And I did not sit down because this was not going to take long. I told her I had come to tell her 3 things, and that I would say them once. 1. I told her I had read the deed dated the 31st of March, 2014, and that I had been beside our mother in the intensive care unit that entire day, and that our mother had been on a ventilator and could not have signed it, and that a board-certified examiner agreed the signature was not hers. 2. I told her the notary who certified that deed had not been a notary at all on that date, that the commission had expired a full month earlier, and that this was a matter of public record that I had simply looked up, the way anyone could. 3. And I told her I had found the receipt and release with my name forged onto it, releasing a $20,000 share I never received, and that the same examiner had an opinion about my signature, too. And then I said one more thing, which was not on the list, but which I had earned. I said, "You told me I was never good with the paperwork." And I let that sit in the courtyard between us for as long as it needed to sit. She did not say anything. There was nothing in the paperwork for her to say. I turned around and I drove home. And that was the entire confrontation. No shouting. No tears. Just 3 numbered facts and 1 old sentence. Handed back. There was one more room I want to take you into before the verdict, because it is the room where the case stopped being mine and became simply true. Stay with me through it. In the lawsuit, there is a step called a deposition, where the other side has to sit in a chair, under oath, with a court reporter taking down every word, and answer the questions your lawyer asks. Diana sat in that chair. I sat across the table, and I said nothing the entire time, because I had nothing left to say to her. And because a person under oath does more damage to themselves in silence than you could ever do by interrupting. Priya did not raise her voice. She slid one document across the table at a time. The way you slide a dish, the way you slide a pen. And she asked small questions with no edges on them. Is this your mother's signature? Diana said, yes. Priya slid the next page across, the hospital record, and asked if Diana was aware that her mother was on a ventilator in intensive care on the date that signature was made. 2 counties from the office where the deed was prepared. Diana was quiet. For a long time. Priya slid the next page, the Secretary of State record, and asked if Diana knew that the notary who certified the deed had not held a valid commission for 31 days when she certified it. Diana said she could not recall. Priya slid the receipt and release across, with my name on it, and asked Diana to identify the signature. And Diana looked at it for a long moment. And then she said the sentence that ended it, which was that she would like to speak with her attorney. I have thought a great deal about that table. My whole life. My sister was the one who slid documents across tables, calm and certain, and I was the soft one on the other side, signing what I was told. In that room, the table turned, and the thing I felt was not triumph. Exactly. It was the quiet, level feeling of a ledger finally balancing. The paper, at last, was being read out loud to the person who thought no one would ever read it. Here is what the facts did in the months after. Because cold revenge still has to land like a verdict, and I want you to feel it land. The court voided the deed. A forged instrument conveys nothing, and a notarization by a person with no commission is no notarization at all. And so, in the eyes of the law, that transfer had never happened. The judge signed an order setting it aside, and a corrective instrument was recorded, and the title to 812 Persimmon Street went back into our mother's name, into her estate, where it had belonged for 8 years while my sister lived, as though it did not. The court reopened the estate and voided the receipt and release. And then the estate was distributed the way the law had always said it should be, in equal halves. To her 2 daughters, my half of a $310,000 house, $155,000, plus the $20,000 from the life insurance that had been forged away. The court did not have to invent justice. It only had to undo a forgery and let the plain law do what it would always have done if no one had reached in and faked a name. And the contraction. This is the part the prompt of my own heart most wanted. And I will give it to you flat, because flat is how it hits hardest. In the years she believed she owned that house outright, Diana had borrowed against it. She had taken a home equity line of credit, $90,000, secured by a house she did not actually own. Because the deed that gave it to her was heir. When the deed was voided, her lender's lien was thrown into question. And the lender did what lenders do, which is turn, calmly and without malice, toward the person who had pledged collateral she did not have. The $90,000 did not evaporate. It simply became, all at once, a personal debt with no house behind it, and the title company, the one she had worked at for 20 years, the one whose desk and reclining chair were the whole reason the family math had been built around her in the first place. An escrow professional charged in a forgery and fraud case is an escrow professional who does not keep her license or her desk. She lived by the paperwork. She lost everything to it. I gave the file to the district attorney because I am not in the business of deciding who gets prosecuted, and that is not a decision a wronged person should make in her own kitchen. I gave them the deed, the commission record, the examiner's report, the notebooks. What they did with it was theirs to do, and what they did was charge it, and what Diana did was take a plea to a reduced count rather than let 12 strangers read 11 notebooks out loud, and she got deferred adjudication and probation and a record. And a court-ordered restitution on top of the estate. And she did not go to prison. The cage I built was made of paper. It held. It held. The notary's commission was revoked permanently, and the surety bond paid out. It was a small bond, $10,000. The way these bonds are, the $10,000 was never the point. The point was the finding, in writing, with a seal, by the state of Texas, that I had been right, and the story she had told for 8 years stopped working. For 8 years, the family version was that Mary took off after the funeral, that Mary was bitter, that Mary cared more about money than about her own mother. A story I could never disprove with feeling, only with a document, which I did not have, until I did. When the court order voiding the deed became public record, the version did too. There was no meeting where anyone apologized. There rarely is. There was only a slow, quiet rearrangement, the kind you feel more than hear, where the relatives who had repeated her account simply stopped repeating it. Because a recorded quarter is louder than a sister's voice at a repast. I did not need them to take my side. I had stopped, years before, needing anyone to take my side. I only needed the record corrected, and the record is now correct. And that is the kind of vindication that does not require a single person to admit anything out loud. Diana escalated, the way they always do after, when the world has stopped agreeing with them. She emailed me a letter, long, single-spaced, with no apology anywhere in it. Only the word sacrifice 11 times, I counted. And a closing line about how our mother would be ashamed of what I had done to this family. I read it once. I did not write back. There is no paperwork required to ignore a person, and that is the only freedom in this whole story that the law had nothing to do with. She showed up at my door, once, in the rain, and stood on the step and said my name. I opened the door 6 inches. I said, "One sentence," I said. "You should have let me near the paperwork." And I closed the door gently, because slamming it would have given her a sound to remember, and I wanted her to remember the quiet. And now I have to tell you about the thread that did not break, because an ending that is only a verdict is not a life. And I did not do all of this to end up a woman organized around a courtroom. My mother had a granddaughter, Diana's daughter, Sophia. She was 9 years old at the funeral, and she was the one person in that church hall who came over to the table with the casserole dishes and put her small arms around my waist and said she missed Grandma's pancakes. which I used to make. I lost her in the years of the rift, the way children get lost in the rift between adults, and I made my peace with that loss, the way I made peace with the rest. Sophia is 17 now, and 3 weeks after the estate closed, a small padded envelope arrived in my mailbox, with no return address and a teenager's handwriting on the front. Inside was a brass key on a cracked leather fob, the spare to 812 Persimmon Street, the one I'd carried out of the repast 8 years before, and finally thrown into a drawer because it turned nothing. Except, this was not that key. This was the other spare, and folded around it was a note in a hand that did not close the loop on the R either. That wrote, I found this in Grandma's old jewelry box. I think it was always supposed to be yours. I remember the pancakes. I am holding the house now. Not because I wanted a house. I will probably sell it, and I will give Sophia the money for school, because she is the one piece of that family I am keeping. And I do not believe a girl should be punished for the sins of the deed her mother forged. But before I sell it, I drove over there last Sunday, and I put Sophia's key in the new lock, the lock that was changed the day they buried my mother to keep me out. And I turned it. It turned. After 8 years, it turned. I want to end where I started, because the meaning of a thing is supposed to grow over the course of an honest story, not shrink. I walked out of a repast with 3 things. Let me give them back to you. Changed. The casserole dish. It was handed to me as the entire size of my worth, your share. The whole of what they thought I was owed. It sits in my cabinet now, and last week I filled it with the pancakes I used to make, and I took it to Sophia's apartment. And the dish stopped being the thing I was given, and became the thing I get to give. That is the difference between an inheritance and a person. One you receive, the other you decide to be. The key. It was the symbol of a door that had been changed to keep me out, a piece of brass that opened nothing. The cruelest small object in the whole story. A key that no longer turns in a lock you used to call home. It turns now. Not because anyone let me back in, but because I read the chain of title all the way back to the truth, and the truth recorded. Put the right name on the house, and the right name made the lock mine again. A key is only ever as honest as the deed behind it. And the notebook. 11 spiral notebooks, 99 cents each, full of my own bad slanting left-handed handwriting. Every entry signed with my initials because that is how I was trained. The most worthless-looking objects you could imagine. The paperwork I was supposedly never any good at. Those notebooks proved where I was on the 31st of March. They proved what I spent. They proved who stayed. A board-certified examiner read my handwriting and a court believed it, because the thing about handwriting, the thing my sister never understood while she was practicing my mother's signature at a desk, is that the smallest mark a person leaves is the hardest one to fake to someone who reads them all day. Delia, the hospice nurse, put her warm hand on a page at 2 a.m, 8 years before any of this, and told me, keep writing. Mija. Paper remembers what people work hard to forget. She was right. About every word. My sister worked very hard to forget 40 months of my life. The paper remembered. All of it. You were never good with the paperwork, Mari. Number. Haues towing. Way tone de fonde. I was the only one who ever told the paper the truth, and in the end, the paper told the truth back, and it told it loud enough to put a house, and a name, and a girl who remembers the pancakes, back where they belonged. If you have ever been the one who kept the record nobody asked you to keep, the receipts, the dates, the notebook in the kitchen drawer, that you almost threw away because you felt foolish for keeping it, do not throw it away. Keep writing. Paper remembers. And one day, when someone decides the cleanest way to erase you is a signature you never made, you are going to open a drawer, and the truth is going to be sitting right there in your own bad handwriting. Waiting, the way it was always waiting, for somebody to finally read it. My name is Marisol Reyes. I read signatures for a living, and the most honest thing I ever owned cost 99 cents. If this reached you, leave the word remember below and tell me, did you keep the notebook or did you let them talk you out of it? I read every one. I always will.